A game of chess is played on a board total of 64 alternating black and white squares. At the start of the game, the black square is always in the bottom left-hand corner. As an historical record, chess games are written down. To facilitate this, algebraic notation is used. Thus, there are 8 vertical files ranging from A to H, and there are also 8 horizontal ranks ranging from 1 to 8. Therefore, each square has its own unique coordinate. For example, at the start of the game, White's king is on E1 and Black's king is on E8. In the game of chess, both White and Black have 2 bishops. One bishop occupies the white squares, the other the black squares. A bishop can move diagonally 1 or more squares. Bishop on H1 travel as far as A8. Bishop on A1 can move as far as H8. In this position, the white squared bishop on D5 can move offensively to A8 and G8 and retreat to H1 and A2. Unlike a knight, when threatened by a pawn, a bishop can take the pawn. For example, bishop on D5 is attacked by the pawn on E6. Bishop captures the pawn on E6, thus. At the start of a game of chess, each player has 2 knights. Although regarded as being the equal of the bishop in strength, the knight has a unique ability. It can jump over other pieces. A knight moves either horizontally 2 squares and 1 square vertically in any direction, or 2 squares vertically and 1 square horizontally in any direction. Here the knight is on F3. He can retreat to either G1 or E1 or H2 and D2. It can also move offensively D4 and H4, as well as G5 and E5. Here the white knight is on F6 and the black rook is on G8. White's knight captures the rook thus. In chess, both white and black have 2 rooks. At the beginning of a game, they are placed on A1, H1, A8 and H8 respectively. A rook can move 1 square or more both horizontally and vertically. Here the white rook is on D1. It can move all the way up D8. It can also move to A1 and H1. In this position, the white rook is on F1 and the black bishop on F5. The rook can capture the bishop, thus moving from F1 to F5. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board. It has the combined powers of a bishop and a rook. It can move 1 or more squares vertically, horizontally, or diagonally. On this empty board, White's queen is on D5. It can move offensively all the way to A8. It can also move D8 and G8. It can also move to A5 and H5 respectively. It can also retreat D1, H1 and A2. In this position, the white queen is on E5 and the black knight is on F6 and the black rook is on A5. The queen can capture either the knight or the rook thus. In chess, both white and black have 8 pawns each. Here is the starting position. White's pawn on E2 can move forward 1 square to E3 or 2 squares forward to E4. This applies to all other pawns on their opening move only. Thereafter, a pawn can move only 1 square forward. In this position, White's pawn is on E5. It can only move 1 square forward to E6. In chess, pawns are often gambited or sacrificed, but they can make captures of their own. Here the white pawn is on E5 and black has pawns on D6 and F6.
The white pawn captures the black pawn on d6 by moving one square diagonally forward. Here, the white pawn captures the black pawn on f6. Although often gambited, a pawn has a unique ability. When it reaches the 8th rank, it achieves promotion and can become either a queen, a rook, bishop, or a knight. In this position, the white pawn is on h7. It moves to h8. It becomes a queen. Here the white pawn is on h7 and the black rook is on g8. The pawn takes the rook and becomes a knight. En Passant occurs when a pawn has reached the 5th rank and the 5th rank only. Here white's pawn is on e5. Black's pawn is on d7 and has yet to move. Black's pawn moves to d5. White captures black's pawn on d6 en passant. Here, however, white's pawn is on e5 and black's pawn is on d6. Black pawn moves to d5. Black's pawn cannot be captured. The object of a game of chess is to checkmate the king. As a consequence, the king is the weakest and most vulnerable piece on the board. A king can only move one square forwards, backwards, vertically, horizontally, and diagonally. King cannot take the opponent's king. However, it can take a pawn or a piece. Here the white king is on e5 and the black knight is on f6. The king takes thus. When a king is threatened by an opponent's piece, it is called check. Check must be responded to immediately. Here, white's knight is on f6 and the black king is on e8. King moves to f7 and is now out of check. Here, white's queen is on d5. Black's bishop is on c8 and black's king is on f7. Black's bishop moves to e6, blocking white's check. Sometimes double check can occur. When this happens, it is obligatory for the king to move. Here, white's queen is on c4, white's knight is on d5, black's king is on g8. White's knight moves to f6, initiating a double check. Black's king moves to f8 and escapes check. A game of chess is finished when one player resigns or the other delivers checkmate. Checkmate occurs when the king has no available escape square. In this position, white's king is on h6, black's king is on h8, and white's queen is on g5. White's queen moves to g7. Black is checkmated. In this position, white's king is on h1, white's rook is on g1. There are white pawns on h2 and g2. Black's knight is on g4. Black's knight on g4 moves to f2. White is checkmated.
Kingside castling takes place when there are no intervening pieces between the king on e1 and the rook on h1. Castling takes place when the king moves to g1 and the rook at the same time moves to f1. Similarly, white has the option queenside castling when there are no intervening pieces between the king on e1 and the rook on a1. Thus, castling takes place the king moving c1 and the rook on a1 to d1. Beginners, castling can be confusing as algebraic notation. It is thus used for kingside castling. It is 0-0, and for queenside castling, it is 0-0-0.